With the grand announcement of Owlcat's next CRPG, Dark Heresy, they've given us a little bit more than just the announcement. Indeed, they've given us additional information. So, today we're going to be talking about that information, specifically what's on the website regarding the game, as well as information that was revealed to us during a live stream in which none other than Lord Slandered, who has now ascended to heights never before seen, participated. And the live stream was, I wouldn't say super revelatory, but it did tell us a bunch of stuff. So what is this game about, especially for people who don't know 40k? And I know a little bit about 40k, like I said, I've done my research, I've read some stuff, but as many of you know, I'm hardly the expert. But it's about the Inquisition, basically. And the Inquisition in Warhammer 40k is this super powerful, super secret organization whose sole purpose is to root out heresy and to counter the enemies of mankind. And there are all sorts of different divisions and orders and this sort of thing. And they pretty much have free authority to do what they want in the name of rooting out heresy and in the name of combating the enemies of mankind. Be it enemies from the Warp, Xenos, this sort of thing. And unlike Rogue Trader, you start off pretty low in this game. You're a mere acolyte, so a beginner within the organization of the Inquisition. You're not a rogue trader. A rogue trader is basically like a king or a queen at the end of the day. Within their domain, which is huge obviously, encompasses multiple systems and planets, they can do whatever they want. As an acolyte within the Inquisition, however, you're not really a nobody, but you're also not super powerful, super influential. In this game, Dark Heresy, you're going to need to work your way up the ladder of the organization within the hierarchy. And so eventually you'll probably attain great levels of power and authority, but that's not how you start. Although, of course, being a member of the Inquisition does afford you influence and authority, because the Inquisition is a powerful and feared organization. But the major difference, among several other differences, is indeed that the Rogue Trader is basically a king regent, and in Dark Heresy you're essentially an entry-level clerk, if you wish to frame it that way. So that's the setup. But what do they say about the actual game? Embrace the role of an Inquisitor in a grim-dark CRPG set in the Warhammer 40k universe. Investigate heresy, command a diverse warband, and shape the fate of the Imperium in a story-rich experience where every decision has weight. Be the conduit of the Emperor's will in a place where all hope was lost decades ago, justice is ruthless, and the line between salvation and damnation is razor thin. Explore the mysteries of maddening Tyrant Star, and overcome the worst horrors thrown at you by the Long Night. Now every CRPG that has decisions that have an impact ultimately, so that's nothing new. But I do think there's a slight difference here, say between Rogue Trader and Dark Heresy, in the sense that the decisions you make are going to be more calculated. Indeed, this game has an actual investigation system, and this investigation system is related to your work as an Inquisitor. And you can bungle investigations, you can do them well, and so when they say that there are going to be consequences for the decisions that you make, or the choices and actions that you take, I think that's quite on the nose, especially for this game. Now they talk about the Tyrant Star. What is the Tyrant Star? Well, for those of you who don't know 40k, and again, I am a neophyte in the 40k universe and probably never will be an expert, but the Tyrant Star is some sort of malevolent celestial entity. Nobody really knows exactly what it is. Some people think it's a warp-born abomination, some people think it's a Xenos superweapon, or a tool of the Chaos Gods. Some people even think that it might be a potential new Chaos God, the Chaos God of Oblivion. There are all sorts of interpretations of the Tyrant Star, but there's one universal when it comes to the Tyrant Star, and that is that it's an extremely malevolent, pernicious, and evil thing and or entity. And in the context of the Tyrant Star, they talk about the Long Night. Now, admittedly, I find this a little confusing because my understanding of the Long Night is that it's sort of the equivalent of the Dark Ages after the fall of Rome in the early Middle Ages. It's basically a time of darkness, of regression, loss of technology, strife, this sort of thing. And as far as I'm aware, in the context of 40k, it's a 5,000-year period. That is a time, as I've just stated, marked by collapse, war, isolation, this sort of thing. What led to the Long Night is a bunch of different things. You have an AI rebellion, which is why the Imperium of Man now rejects AI and uses machine spirits instead. You have the fall of the Eldar, and the birth of Slaanesh, the goddess of lust, basically, and a bunch of other things. But I'm not sure if they're referring to the consequences of the Long Night, because as far as I'm aware, the game itself is contemporaneous, or nearly contemporaneous, with the events of Rogue Trader. So maybe they're talking about the consequences of the Long Night, or maybe this is a different Long Night that I'm not familiar with. But in any event, the Tyrant Star is basically a cosmic horror. Nobody knows exactly what it is, but it is very ominous, and in some sense probably more dangerous than the Chaos Gods themselves, because it's simply unknown and incomprehensible. Next they talk about your party, basically, your warband. You are not alone in the darkness. Every inquisitorial warband is unique, and yours is no exception, ranging from loyal Imperial subjects, such as the veteran guardsmen from the death world of Katakan, to nefarious Xenos, including a bird-like Croo mercenary. Each and every one of them offers distinctive gameplay and a new perspective on the story with fully voiced dialogues. Now, this is right off the bat one thing they've said, that all the characters are going to be fully voiced. There have been concerns offered by various individuals that full voicing could detract and take away from the dialogue. Owlcat has assured us that this is not the case, but in any event, your warband or your party is going to be similar but also very distinct from your party in Rogue Trader. In Rogue Trader, almost everyone is just a normal human. You have a few exceptions, obviously, but this is going to be a much more mixed and diverse band of characters. And we'll talk about the individual companions in a bit, but one thing that Owlcat has stated is that they're going to make the gameplay and or building of a character more transparent. By that, they don't mean streamlining in the sense of making it very easy and simple and dumbing it down. But a lot of people had issues with Rogue Trader, it being a little bit difficult to understand, especially if you're not familiar with the system, you've never played the tabletop. And Owlcat has stated that essentially it's going to be more accessible in that sense. Not dumber, but more accessible, more transparent, and easier to understand, which I think is a welcome change in general. Now, they also mentioned, for example, that you're going to have more verticality in this game. And Rogue Trader has a little bit of verticality, but not that much. And overall, I think when it comes to gameplay and combat, and indeed in terms of graphics, something else they've stated, this is going to be an upgrade from Rogue Trader. They've stated that the graphics are going to be improved. The pixels are going to be improved, basically. And in some sense, this is analogous to what Wrath of the Righteous was to Kingmaker. They took home certain lessons from Kingmaker back in the day, applied those lessons to Wrath of the Righteous to make what I would argue is a better game. And I think you can think of the same recipe here in that sense, inasmuch as they've learned things from making Rogue Trader, which is a great game, obviously, but everything can be improved upon, and games can be improved upon as well. And in this case, they've learned these lessons from Rogue Trader, and they're going to be adding improved graphics, improved combat, improved systems. Now, that doesn't mean that the combat or the systems are going to be completely different. They're very, very similar. There's going to be a lot of overlap, they've said. There's some differences in terms of archetype and origin and what have you, but they will be very similar. It's just that the game overall will be an upgrade compared to Rogue Trader and a better quality overall. Now, so far, 5 companions have been officially announced, but there are more companions than just 5. You will have a party of 6, just like in Rogue Trader, but the number of companions is roughly the same, at least in the base game. Who knows what's going to happen in expansions, as there will almost certainly be expansions. But let's talk about the companions. Let's start with the human woman, Epione Spes, an acolyte of the Inquisition and one of the top Medicae specialists in the Tyrantine Cabal. She earned her place in the ranks of the Holy Inquisition with her outstanding intellect and her drive to serve humanity flawlessly. Whether in the Chirurgeon's theater or at the scene of a mystifying crime, Acolyte Spes' cold analytical thinking and vast knowledge makes her indispensable. In combat, her razor-sharp scalpel claws allow Epione to defend herself effectively, and the unique fast-acting compounds in her combat injectors are enough to get even severely wounded comrades back on their feet. So this woman is a good example of one of the many different types, or divisions, or orders, if you will, within the Inquisition. You have all types of different characters, different classes. They all ultimately serve the will of the Emperor, and specifically the Inquisition, but they have different skill sets and different things they take to the battlefield, as well as off the battlefield. And in this case, we have an actual medical doctor, it would seem. But in other terms, specifically her knowledge beyond the medical and her analytical thinking, probably an essential companion in terms of your investigative endeavors. So, an interesting companion, no doubt. I don't know much about the medical division of the Inquisition, or for that matter, many of the divisions, but it sounds interesting. Next up, we have a human male, Haymar Davos, an acolyte of the Inquisition and a combat specialist in military operations in the harshest of environments. A member of the illustrious Astra Militarum regiment, from the death world of Kanakhan, Haymar has stared into death's open maw many times over, and each time found a way to survive. He is a veteran of numerous battles, and has managed to transfer his knowledge and skills from the jungles of Kanakhan to the concrete jungles of the Hive cities, making him an essential asset for operations in the most dangerous corners of the Imperium. In battle, Acolyte Davos relies on high-speed weapons capable of turning the battlefield into a deadly trap, as well as his formidable Kanakhan knife. So again, a different type of soldier or member of the Inquisition, in this case a military specialist. You have a medical specialist, and here you have a military specialist. And in this case, very human. Now, many of you might know I have this bias about humans. I need to make a video about this at some point in time. I don't really like playing humans, but in any event, 2 humans so far. Now, the third companion that's been revealed is where things start to get interesting if you're bored with humans like I am. And this companion, Conscript 0118B, also known as Cog, is an Auggrin. Now, technically, Auggrins are humans, to the best of my understanding, but they're mutated, and they're sort of like ogres. They're giant, powerful, and super strong, and they're basically the muscle of the party or the war band. An Auggrin once assigned to the 27th Centillion Fusiliers, a regiment of the Astra Militarum, nicknamed Cog for convenience. He's a member of a mutated human subspecies characterized by its immense stature, strength, and endurance. Like any Auggrin, Cog is incredibly fierce and stoic, and his understanding of orders has been enhanced with a special cranial implant. Cog is doggedly loyal to the Imperial Creed and his military leaders, and he sows terror on the battlefield. He cannot be stopped by obstacles or injury, and the strike weapons in his hands can break through any armor. So this Auggrin Cog is sort of like the tank and cannonball rolled into one in terms of the warband. He's going to be the muscle of the team, but also the guy who probably can take the most punishment, I would have to assume. Now, based on the description, I have to assume that he's not very bright, as he's basically been mutated and made to take orders. They talk about his loyalty being enhanced by cranial implants, so I don't expect a lot of insight or any impressive observations in terms of investigation coming from Cog the Auggrin, but I'm glad at least we're getting something different from the bog standard human in this case. Now, the next companion is the companion people are most excited for, and for understandable reasons. We're getting a proper Xenos, a proper alien, as it were. Now, in Rogue Trader, you can have basically 2 different space elves in your party, specifically Aldari and Drukhari, respectively. But let's be honest, space elves are not that interesting at the end of the day. What is interesting is this Kroot, called Ra'aki, a Xenos from the Kroot race, humanoid predators capable of evolving by consuming the genetic material of other species. Ra'aki was once a tracker in her tribe, one of her Warshaper's closest followers, possessing the ability to sense others' emotions and memories through the eating of flesh. However, disobeying the Shaper's laws has turned Ra'aki into an inedible, an outcast forced to find her way separate from her tribe. In battle, the Xenos relies on her trusty rifle and her Hekra familiar, the last reminder of her lost home. Now, I've read up on the Kroot, and they're quite interesting. They're essentially avian or avian-like aliens or Xenos that have special abilities as implicated here. They can consume the flesh of fallen foes and absorb their DNA and their genetic traits, so to speak. They have a short lifespan. They're hunters, they're carnivores. And an example of this eating to DNA conversion phenomenon would be if they were to eat orcs, they would become stronger. If they were to eat Eldar, their reflexes would be enhanced. But of course, you can overindulge apparently as a Kroot, and you can turn into a feral Kroot, from my understanding as well. And they're very savage people, apparently. They hail from a death world called Pech, which is the German word for bad luck, by the way. And I think this is going to be a very interesting companion just because it's the most alien thing we've encountered thus far. Now, my limited understanding of the Croo is that they're mercenaries, by and large, but they primarily work within the Tau Empire. The Tau are a separate race of beings, so it's going to be interesting to find out why this particular Croo is working for the Inquisition. Finally, we have another Xenos companion, a little less interesting to be honest, because again, it's a space elf, but Lier Carnareth, an Eldari Corsair, a member of the ancient Xenos race and endowed with psychic powers. After entering into a precarious alliance with a radical inquisitor, Lier set foot on one of humanity's hive worlds, risking his life for his own mysterious ends. He is a wayseeker, capable of plotting routes for Corsair vessels through the dimension known as the Webway. However, this is not the extent of his mystical gifts. The awesome powers under the command of the Xenos' detached mind surpass the abilities of most human psychers, and should he find himself in combat, Lier places no restraints on this deadly talent. So, this guy sounds pretty cool to be honest, like a super-powered psyker essentially, with mysterious abilities that humans don't have access to. I think the real question revolving around this character, if you know anything about the Eldari, is why would he hook up with the Inquisition of all people? Now, he obviously has his own reasons. They say he has his mysterious ends here, right? But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That said, I'm very much looking forward to finding out why he's involved with the Inquisition, because as far as I'm aware, the Eldari, and specifically Eldari Corsairs, do not ally themselves with humans, let alone with dangerous organizations that are inimical to them on principle, such as the Inquisition. So there you have it. Those are the 5 companions revealed thus far, and what we know about them. There are going to be, as has been stated by Owlcat themselves, more companions, approximately the same amount as in Rogue Trader, but they have yet to be revealed, and they will be in due time and due course. Now, overall, I am looking forward to Dark Heresy, and I'm looking forward to it more than I was Rogue Trader, and here's why. As I stated prior, this is going to be an overhaul and improvement on Rogue Trader. It's not going to be the same thing. For example, as I stated earlier, you're not a Rogue Trader, you're not the king of massive systems. Your ship is going to be tiny by comparison as well. But I think the refinement that Owlcat is going to add to this game, and the different upgrades they're going to inject into this game, is going to make it, qualitatively speaking, a better game than Rogue Trader. And I, for one, find the concept of investigation and mysteries and a great evil, for example, such as the Tyrant Star, more interesting than just being a powerful regent and or king or queen who's lording it over their subjects. That's just my personal taste. So I have to say, I am more interested, maybe even a little bit psyched for this game in contrast to Rogue Trader, and I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. I know I have in my audience, in my subs, some true 40k fans, some true 40k fanatics. I'm not one of them. I'm still learning. I am a neophyte and probably will always remain a neophyte, but I can appreciate the depth and the lore and all the effort that both Owlcat and Games Workshop has put into this amazing universe, and I'm looking forward to the final product. But in any event, as always, thank you for tuning in. And if you like my content, you like my videos, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's much appreciated, as it really helps out the channel, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.